Oh, that's live. Sorry about that. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the movie discussion Pocket Dimension. After a week off, in honor of that, I'm wearing my fanciest shirt. It's got the polo player on it, so
Oh, nice.
you know it's fancy. Uh, yeah. So sorry about the hiccup last week, but sometimes things happen and stuff. No big deal. It's probably good for everybody to get a little extra time and stuff, and we sorted this out because as you'll see tonight, we're doing a little bit of a change in direction. We wanted to get a little bit of a breather from some of the kinds of films we've been doing. If you've been watching, we've covered fairly different things, but crime dramas, and then when we were doing some of the sci-fi the last couple of weeks, it was stuff with fairly serious and heavy themes
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And I think we felt we needed something a little off the track from that, and maybe something a little more lighthearted and a little more easy, and not heavy and stuff. So I immediately thought of fantasy and started racing, thinking about just various fantasy films. And I know anybody that knows film, and also anybody that like watched our other show, remembers the Sausage Factory. We'd often talk about the '80s, much to do with what we talked about there, because the '80s was like the golden age for slasher films, in particular, and it was also the rise and also probably golden age of at least the over-the-top style action film. And pretty much everyone knows that. That's kind of common knowledge. Even casual fans pretty much know that's when slashers were at their coming out all over the place. Even lesser known ones were quite successful because it was an easy formula. You didn't have to have high budgets or well-known actors to pay, but you could probably get a decent profit out of it. In action, it just sort of got more pumped up as the decade went on. It got more over the top. The heroes got bigger and stronger and stuff like that. And I think the thing that's kind of unique to the '80s that's more overlooked is definitely fantasy, because in a lot of ways I almost see like that as maybe but something special about the '80s, because just because of what fantasy is and how it's by definition kind of harder to put on film, you can understand why, like, in the first few decades of film there wasn't that much of it, and what was there was kind of sparse because of limitations. You'd have a lot of really fake looking stuff if you have like it's supposed to have magical creatures or a fictional world and stuff like that. And there were various ups and downs and stuff. And the '70s kind of saw some kind of semi-popular low-budget fantasy fare, like Land of the Lost, and movies in that sort of vein, where they had a certain amount of kitsch to them, and people enjoyed them on that level. But as far as like being a seriously done, intricately done, detailed, big budget sort of fantasy, that just didn't really, I don't think, existed, except maybe in a small case-by-case basis until the '80s, which I think mostly just had to do with technology and stuff like that. Not just cameras and graphics and stuff, but also what people were doing as far as practical effects goes. Like, costumes and makeup had certainly come a long way too. And so, I mean, in the '80s, you've got, we haven't talked much about fantasy, but when we did Watership Down, I just mentioned that it was considered what you might call low fantasy, which just basically means very real world, all elements to make it fantastical. In that case, rabbits with a certain amount of social sophistication and intelligence that probably don't really exist. Apart from that, very real world and stuff. And on the other end of the spectrum is high fantasy, which basically means like completely different world, full of things that don't exist in this world, often magical creatures and things like that. And one of the big staples of that for the '80s, but kicked into gear, of course, is also what's known as the swords and sorcery genre. And you got the Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
1981 had Excalibur, which might have been like one of the first like sort of big budget serious sorts of takes on that kind of fantasy world. And then you just saw the rise of certain other filmmakers. We talked about Terry Gilliam before. He had Time Bandits with time traveling dwarves. Fantasy, it's a little more sci-fi, but sci-fi elements. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And then even Ridley Scott, he did Legend. Like a lot of people, I think, when you think of fantasy, there's just a certain number of '80s films that pop in your head. Legend is probably one of them.
Yeah, that's what was always recommended to me when I was trying to find Willow. Like, we don't have Willow, but come watch Legend.
Mm-hmm. And in the latter half of the decade, what was interesting was where we started to see fantasy cross over into other genres where that it would start to like mix with action, where you get stuff like Highlander, which was kind of like an action movie, but you know, it had like a fantastical sort of premise and fantastical characters in it. Big Trouble in Little China was just a huge mishmash of all sorts of different things, but definitely some fantasy in there. And that's kind of more common now. I think that happens all the time now. That's become very popular. And not to get way ahead of ourselves, but I think the 90s were kind of a wasteland for fantasy films after the 80s. And there just weren't very many, and there weren't very many good ones either. And then, you know, we had a huge renaissance with the success of what many people consider the best fantasy films, the adaptations of the Lord of the Rings films. And that started off like a crazy boom, especially considering, again, computer animation and stuff like that would really help that out. And so there was all sorts of stuff that would follow that. Not necessarily as good, but, you know, you have the Chronicles of Narnia movies, the Golden Compass, Harry Potter, of course, is a big part of it too. Stuff like that. Anyway, obviously more will occur to me. You can even say Pirates of the Caribbean might have been swept up in that because of its fantasy elements. So in the wake of those movies, we saw a real renaissance of fantasy movies, but they're still kind of different than what we saw in the 80s. And so, going back to my original point, when I thought of it, I just thought, well, I hope that, you know, over time we'll do more fantasy. But if I wanted to start somewhere, I definitely wanted to start with an 80s movie. And there are a few that I named that would have been good, like Legend and stuff like that. But one that I just hadn't seen in a long time, and it didn't occur to me would be hard to find or anything, and it turned out to be for both of us kind of a challenge to find, is the Ron Howard directed film Willow. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It came out in '88.
Like, who knew it would be hard to find a movie like this? Like,
it's a well-known movie. People know it. I remember it from when I was a kid. Ron Howard was he wasn't as big a director then, but he was certainly an up-and-comer at the time. You know, he'd just done like Cocoon and Splash. And it's produced by George Lucas. It's part of Lucasfilm, and the original story is a story by George Lucas, which, if you are familiar with the film, is very easy to see. You see a lot of hallmarks of his storytelling. Apparently, it was a story that he at least conceived way back in the early 70s, before he'd done anything.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of sat on the shelf for a while, and then he came back to, after the success of Star Wars. Someone else did the actual script for it, but the original story itself was by George Lucas, and he personally selected Ron Howard, who he knew a little bit from American Graffiti and stuff, who I guess he'd known for over the years, and thought that Ron Howard would be a good choice for it. And again, another obvious thing about it, of course, is that it starred Warwick Davis. The role was specifically with him in mind, which is kind of cool, and, you know, definitely a landmark film as far as little people being in movies. I mean, can anybody name? There might have been one or two, but how many movies that predate this? Like, the main character was a little person. It's still pretty a rare thing today, even all these years later, right?
That was another thing. I think Warwick Davis should have gotten top billing on this movie, or at least should be listed first. You know, but it's Val Kilmer. You know, it's
Val Kilmer. And I mean, at the time, Val Kilmer wasn't much of a name himself. You know, this is almost a breakout role for Val Kilmer if you look at like his list of accomplishments up to that point.
Top Gun had maybe just recently come out. I'm not sure.
Top Gun was just a couple years earlier, so I guess that was his star-making role, because that was about 2 years earlier. But
I'm sure he got paid pretty well. I'm sure
they needed his name to help sell it and stuff. But yeah, it definitely is. It all hinges on Warwick Davis, which was great. I think it's a great thing, and because these opportunities don't come up with. So I give respect to Lucas for that, because he said like he really wanted to do a story where the main character was a little person. And obviously, when we get into it, huge parallels between this and Lord of the Rings characters and the Hobbits. Again, I mean, just on the surface, it's very similar in that we have a little person in this. They're called, what are they called? Like Niflings.
Nelwins?
Nelwins, that's right. Nelwins. I was saying flings. Yeah, Nelwins. So he lives in a Nelwyn community, which is very similar to the Hobbits in the Lord of the Rings world. They're kind of off to their side, living their own little lives. They seem to have the same sort of ideas about the wide world Hobbits do, which is, you know, we'll ignore the world, it'll ignore us. What happens outside doesn't concern us. And then you have sort of a reluctant hero who's thrust into it by circumstances beyond his control, and that being Willow, forced into this big, all-important quest. So right off the bat, very similar. But still, it has enough stuff, I think, in it that makes it and be different. But
yeah, this is one. Just before we get too deep here in the plot,
yeah.
I just wanted to say, this is one that we did, or at least I had a hard time finding this movie. I was like, okay, cool. This will give me an excuse to buy the Blu-ray because I would love to watch this in HD, because I'm sure it would look great.
Yeah, I think so.
But I was like, cool. I'll track it down, see if I can buy it. And it's I posted this on the Twitter page, and it's just kind of irritating that a film this, as there's a fan base there. There's a cult following that would buy this. I mean, like I had friends that, this was their favorite movie, and they'd want to track that down and watch as an adult. But the Blu-ray, that actually is a U.S. Blu-ray. I tracked that, or I figured that out, that it is a U.S. Blu-ray, but it's long out of print.
Long out of print. Yeah, I've never seen it. I've never seen it here in Canada.
The DVD is out of print, but you can find it for a reasonable price. But I heard the transfer.
And the DVD is not good. I actually had access to the DVD a little more than 10 years ago, and it's not the release it deserved. It didn't look very good. It didn't have very much on it. It had a horrible... if you look up, if somebody wants to do an image search sometime, just do an image search for the DVD cover. It was embarrassing. Like the movie, again, if you look up, the movie was one of those movies from the 80s that had one of those really great posters, like the one behind me made up for it.
Yeah.
That's not the DVD art. The DVD art is just this dumb picture of like the various characters and Willow doing like a ta-da type flourish on the front. And it's embarrassing. Like the movie deserved better than that.
I love that artwork. I don't know why they don't use that more. They want to Photoshop this bullshit together, and
and the Blu-ray cover, as I said when I looked at it, it's at least better than that, but it's still not as good as it could be. And it makes you wonder how a movie like this would be out of print. You'd think there'd be more high demand. It's definitely a cult movie. It's not like a little known cult movie. People know it.
Well, I went back
again. Ron Howard, George Lucas. These are big names that people know.
This was the 14th top grossing movie in 1988. So not gangbusters, but a lot of stuff came out, so I mean
it had a strong opening weekend. It fell off after that, but it had a strong opening weekend. It was by no means a flop. It was just basically what you would call sort of a modest success. But and historically it had some things going for it, like we said, like of course Warwick Davis, sort of a star-making performance, and even today, as a little person, your options is still limited. Being typecast is pretty much inevitable. But still, this at least showed, here's a little person that can carry an entire movie, be the main character, not like a little side character and stuff like that. And also, some of the effects that were used, I think they did the Industrial Light and Magic, were kind of groundbreaking at the time. There's a few transformation sequences, transform into animals and things like that were that hadn't been seen up to that point. So I always think of it as sort of a landmark fantasy movie.
Absolutely.
It's surprising that in some ways it's become obscure.
It was on television all the time, and that's where we would watch it.
That's how I saw it first, for sure.
Good, family film to watch, and we watched it all the time. And I don't understand. It's Lucasfilms. I don't know if maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe there's rights issues or something there. But
there could be. I've just looked at it at Wikipedia and some things like that, and nothing talks about that. That doesn't mean that's the only source. There could be other places, but I just mean, just in stuff where I was looking up, nope, nothing really said anything about that, which is a little odd. Like you said, the movie had a certain amount of popularity at the time. I played a Nintendo game of it. I have very vague memories. They made an NES game off it. So, obviously that doesn't happen without it being fairly popular and well-known.
Didn't think so.
Yeah, I think it was a Capcom game. So, sort of a big deal, you think. Anyway, and another thing that sort of makes it relevant is maybe they'll do a reprint, because as of October, I haven't heard anything since October, but back in October, Ron Howard said they are doing a sequel, and he is going to direct it.
I don't know how I feel about that.
But I haven't heard anything since then. The last, if you look it up, the last news you can find is basically October 2016.
I don't think I want that.
I don't know either. But at least it's not a remake.
Yeah, well, yeah, true, and it'll probably have Warwick Davis in it, which is cool.
Yeah, that is the plan. It is to follow. It is.
Well,
to
it has to have
follow
Warwick
him.
Davis in it.
You know what? Originally, like some of the stuff, if you read, like they were thinking when they were thinking sequel, it wasn't going to be on Willow all. It was going to be on the little girl and what she grew up to. Like that's what some of the early stuff was, and they're like, no, it is going to be on Willow, and that's what obviously Warwick Davis wanted, and that's how it's working out. But
yeah, I was looking at this Blu-ray, the special features on here, and it's got tons of cool stuff. Deleted scenes. It's got two commentaries, two feature-length commentaries, and then a personal video diary of Warwick Davis during the making of the film.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that sounds definitely worth getting. We really like that to come out. But yeah, it came out in '88, just sort of as the genre was starting to lose steam again. But I'm just looking here, and '88 still had some fairly big, like I mentioned, the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Obviously, it wasn't a big movie, but it was a big movie over like in Europe and stuff. Beetlejuice. That was when Tim Burton sort of got his feet on the floor. What's we got here? And a Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was sort of a different sort of thing, but that was just, a huge movie. But then in the next couple of years, once you get into the early 90s, like fantasy was sputtering and dying sort of once again. It's kind of funny how these things ebb and flow.
Yeah, it looks like once you hit 1990, it's pretty much nothing.
And like I said, when I was looking it up on Wikipedia, it even said in like the production of this movie, they were having trouble getting a studio for it because studios were a little lukewarm on fantasy films, having seen them as being sort of not profitable. Even though there have been a lot in the 80s, it's true. There were a lot of misses. There were a lot of ones, Krull comes to mind.
Yeah.
That did not make
I never really cared for Krull.
No, but you have to be just sort of hardcore into that scene, I think, to really think that Krull was that good. But, slight spoiler for people ahead, we might be talking about some Ralph Bakshi in the future, so I'll say, but he had a very ambitious sword and sorcery film called Fire and Ice that came out in '83, which I'm pretty sure was also mostly a flop. But we'll get into it as we go to the movie, because having seen it again, I feel good in saying that like it's pretty much as good as I remember. It's a really good movie. But my favorite fantasy films from that age were the ones by Jim Henson, Dark Crystal and Labyrinth for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me wonders if like Jim Henson's death didn't have something to do with the decline of the genre in some ways. He was such a force in it.
It coincides with that period of time, doesn't it? It's what did he die? 87?
Yeah, it was sometime late 80s.
88, 89. But yeah, Beastmaster, I don't think you mentioned that one earlier. Time Bandits, I don't know if you would consider that.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I mean, it's dwarves, time traveling.
Princess Bride was 87.
Mm-hmm. I just recently watched that, and not to get into a thing about it, but another thing I read was like some of the critics directly compared Willow because it came out a year like later than after that, and a lot of people are like, Princess Bride does this all better. I'm gonna just say right now, like people of my generation, Bride, they never shut up about it. They constantly quote it. I think it's fine. I watched it a few days ago. I think Willow is way better.
Me too.
Because and I mean, I get what Princess Bride's supposed to be. It's fine because it's sort of like an homage to fantasy and fairy tales, and it's kind of a send up to. It's making fun of some of the conventions and stuff like that. But when all said and done, that's fine. But I kind of just like it being played straight if you do it well. And Willow, it takes itself seriously, tells a real story, has a real world, and I just like that more. I don't know. To me, Billy Crystal mugging for the camera, quipping and stuff. I mean, I like Princess Bride. It's a fun movie. It has some nice visuals and memorable things. But to me, I don't think it compares to something like Willow.
That Billy Crystal scene you're talking about is probably my favorite part of the movie.
But like I said, I don't.
You can take it or leave it, man. I don't particularly like it. I mean,
I don't dislike anything in the movie. I'm just saying if I have a choice between that and Willow is what I'm saying. That's not.
I think Willow's head and shoulders above this movie.
Right. Like I said, I can appreciate Princess Bride for what it is and what it's doing, but in a way, it's kind of taking an easy route. It's just relying on a lot of conventions and cliches and stuff. They're even pointing them out, showing them to us and stuff, just sort of to tell a very but with their own little spin on it, which is fine. And I don't want to turn this into something where I tear down that movie because I do enjoy the movie.
I think it may have something to do with I didn't watch that in the time. You know, I didn't see that until maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
Because it was like just check it off the list type of movie. You know?
I definitely saw it later. Like I didn't see it as a little kid either, which I know hurts it too. I saw it when I was a bit older and stuff. But I just mean, yeah, people my age, basically anybody to in their 40s, they just rant about this movie. It's one of their favorite. You know, they never shut up. Even people that aren't into movies, this is like one they really know, and that's fine. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying I think I surprise some people because they know my age group and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you don't like Princess Bride?" It's like, no, I do like Princess Bride. I just think it's kind of overrated. Yeah, and if I put it next to something like Willow, to me, Willow is way better.
I'd agree with that. Never-Ending Story. Did you mention that one?
No, that's another one I think is a little bit overrated too.
Me too.
It has some sequences that I think are good and cool and memorable, and certainly has a really great song, which I think really helps. A lot of people really love that song. I think it's a great song. You know, I'm a fan of the book, and I don't think it ruins the book or anything, but I mean, they were so... the author of the book was so mad that he just completely took his name out of the movie. He was so mad what they did. And I can kind of understand it. Now, I mean, it's a difficult sort of adaptation. As far as Never-Ending Story goes, it gets to the halfway point of the book, and that's where they end. Go after that, because what actually happens in the book is once you get to that point, the kid Bastian, that's when he does cross over from the real world into the book world. He does do that, and they don't have any of that happen.
Well, they made sequels.
They made awful sequels. Like
they made like 4 of them, so
teeth-grittingly bad sequels. like some people are like, "Oh, the second one's not that bad." I'm like, maybe you should watch it again. Have you watched it lately? I mean, I get it. The third is one of the worst things you'll ever see. And you've got like a rock monster singing "Born to Be Wild" at one point. And like you see how much cheaper the effects got too, because things that looked pretty good in the movie from 1984 suddenly, like in the 90s, look like absolute garbage because there's like no budget or effort put into it.
Well, it was all straight to video too, wasn't it?
Oh, I would have to assume. God,
I could be wrong, but I would assume so.
Yeah, so these were some of these movies that have gone through my mind when we were thinking about it. And again, I also thought Never-Ending Story, I know top to bottom, it wouldn't be really too interesting for me to revisit it because I've seen it quite a bit. I enjoy it for what it is, but I also think it's kind of overrated. So I just really thought Willow sort of hit the right spot for this. It was, you know, a contemporary of those movies. It was around that time, and I hadn't actually seen it in many years, and I was sort of curious how I'd think it would hold up and stuff, and I was very pleased to find out that, you know, in watching it in the last couple of days, that I really enjoy it, and it's pretty much as good as I remember it. But yeah, so we get into a quest where, and I don't want to. This is what I mean. This movie certainly doesn't use anything that original either. Like I said, it's got those parallels with Lord of the Rings. So I don't want people to think I'm coming down too hard on Princess Bride, because this movie also just uses a lot of conventions and things like that. We've got a prophecy is made that a baby will. Cruel sorceress queen, so she sends out like this order to get all the girl children or something that have been born, and one manages to get smuggled out of the castle and stuff and being pursued, and winds up going on a river, and then it's like Moses in the Bible, right? Moses among the bulrushes, where comes all the way downstream, way far away from all that, to Willow's little area where his village is and his farm, and happen upon the baby, and that's what gets him into the quest. So I mean, stuff like that, yeah, I mean, I get that's not original. We've seen that before, and then the quest is kind of standard in a way, protect this baby type thing. But still, I mean, what they do with it is what matters, and what's good. So you get a little insight into his life. He's a farmer. He's already a father. Has a couple young children. Warwick Davis was in his late 20s. He basically looks that. It's always a little harder to tell, I think, the age of a little person.
He was born in 70, so he was only 17, 18 years old.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, 70. I was thinking, for some reason, I was thinking 60. You're right. So, okay. There you go. So you're right. So he's quite, and there it is. That's exactly what it is, me saying, like, but he definitely passes for a bit older, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I never would have guessed he was that young.
Yeah, you would have bought that he was a young father. He's young, but you would have bought that he was a young father with kids and a wife. And that's some of it's a Warwick Davis, and I think also some of it, as I've said, I mean, there's no disrespect intended or anything like that. I think a lot of the time with little people, sometimes it is harder to figure out their ages just because of, you know, the way they look, and that's not a bad thing or anything like that by any measure. So we've got that. We get a little insight, and it is very Lord of the Rings like, very Hobbit like. We should see their little community. Little, don't mean that, but you know, of all of them. And there's like, he's a farmer, but he dreams of being a sorcerer. The village has its own like local sorcerer who I guess takes on an apprentice every once in a while. He's an aspiring apprentice. He wants to join. Mm-hmm. We see that Willow can do like magic tricks, but not actual real magic, and he really wants to like cross over into that world. He fails the little challenge along with the others, and so no apprentice this year. From another really good character actor, I can't remember his name, of course, but another little person, obviously, playing the role of the older wizard. Let's see if I can find it.
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know.
His name's Billy Barty. The High Eldwin is his title, and he's played by Billy Barty, who is in a million movies. He was in movies as early as the 30s when he was just a kid. Like, he just had a crazy long career. Like, not anything big or anything, but he was in movies for a very long time. He died in 2000.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, obviously, little people are easier to recognize because there's less of them, and they're little people and stuff. But I recognize him same way I recognize most people. He has a very distinct voice, especially when he got older, and you hear it in this film. And I'm pretty sure anybody who hears that, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard that in like other stuff. But I mean, even in the 80s, like he has a role in Legend. He's in Masters in the Universe. You know, so he was already being used quite a bit in the 80s for fantasy roles and stuff. So he's got that going on, and then the village is attacked by some of the sentries that have been sent out to search for the baby, which are like these wild dog things, which is nice too. It's a nice touch because, you know, it's a pretty regular thing for movies for people to have like costumes. This is dogs wearing costumes, which is kind of cool. Like, I don't know what breed of dog they use, but some breed of dog, and they've got them like made up wearing stuff, giving them like manes and funny faces and long tails, and it's kind of cool just because, you know, it's actual dogs.
Is it like in Beastmaster? Did they die after they used them in the
God,
movie?
I really hope not.
Did you ever hear about that?
I didn't know that about Beastmaster.
Yeah, they had a black tiger.
What, the makeup poisoned it or something?
Some sort of dye got into its skin.
That's sad.
Yeah.
That's a sad thing too, especially with a rare animal like a tiger.
Yeah. Even more rare now.
Yeah. They repel the attack, and then they make the same decision, and it's kind of a similar thing to like when, you know, it's like, Frodo, you got to get rid of this ring. It's like, you got to get rid of this baby. So they have to set off on a quest because it's the same thing. You know, the outside world's none of our concern. We can't have them come kill us and stuff like that. And he's like, you've got to go. And then they make a little group to take the baby, and it's not going to be an epic quest. Their original ideas. You know, the first like big person we see, we give it to them, and we leave. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they make this little group, including sort of the head of the council guy that's been giving him a hard time. Something cut. Burgle Cut. Yes, Burgle Cut. He has kind of a bit of a funny line because at first when they're saying who has to go and stuff like that, they mention this guy, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. He's the best warrior in their village. And Burgle Cut's like, no, we need him here. We need him to protect. And then the wizard says, Burgle Cut, you're going to lead this expedition. He's like, oh, we need him to come. There's just, you know, the movie's not full of really laugh out loud moments, but it has, you know, some lines here and there. You know, as we said, we want something sort of a lighter tone. It's a serious story, but it has a lighter tone. And it's not long before they come across, the first person they find is Val Kilmer, who is sort of the Han Solo of this movie. As we said about George Lucas, you can almost like take every main character and equate them to somebody in Star Wars. You've got as Luke, Val Kilmer as Han, Sorsha as a different sort of Leia with a little bit of Vader in there. You've got the evil queen as the Emperor.
If you want to go down that road, man, people always want to talk shit about Quentin Tarantino. You want to talk about a ripoff artist is George Lucas, man. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Not that some of the movies he did aren't really good, but you know, you can't say that he's.
Like I said, I don't give Lucas credit for being super original. I just give him credit for taking, and he openly admits what he's taken from. You know, when he talks about like the influences of like westerns and samurai films and legends. Like he openly says, you know, that's what I'm following, and just sort of putting my own spin on and putting my own world. So I don't come down too hard on that, because at least he knows what works to a certain extent.
Okay, yeah.
As I said, when we get into this stuff,
here, so.
this movie's not going to be. We can't discuss it in the same way we discussed other movies. This movie isn't like a character study. It doesn't have deep, heavy themes, but the characters are good for what they are. You know, none of these characters are deep or great, but they fit the world, and I think for the most part they're pretty cool, and they're not too cliched. And as far as something being a little different, I did like the twist of Sorcha. I did like the idea of, you know, the evil queen, and like her main person to send out is actually her daughter, and her daughter is actually this warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Wants to prove herself and wants to be taken seriously, which you can understand, especially being a woman and stuff. So that is a little bit different. I did like that character a lot. Just at all, Joanne Whaley or something. I'm sure I've seen her in other things, but the name doesn't mean anything to me. She's actually English, and she did marry Val Kilmer after this movie, which is kind of funny.
I would imagine they didn't stay married very long.
They made it till 96.
Oh, wow.
Managed to get 2 kids, so I guess longer than the average sort of Hollywood type.
Yeah, they gave it a go.
Yeah, they gave it a go for sure. But no, she's not really. Now I'm looking like she's not really in stuff, which is too bad, because I mean, yeah, maybe I haven't seen her or anything. Wow, she's in The Man Who Knew Too Little. I saw that.
She started having kids. That was her mistake, and then she retired probably.
But I really like her. I like her character, and I like her in this movie. She's very pretty and lively sort of character. I like sort of the enthusiasm and fire. Fiery redhead, yeah, sure. But she brought him into that to the role, which I enjoyed for sure. And yeah, as they go on here, so our introduction to Val Kilmer, they read us right off again. He's kind of a Han Solo character, because like they find him, he's in a cage. He's been caged for some sort of crime that's never specified and stuff, and he's all too willing to take the baby, but most of them are all too willing to just hand over the baby again to literally the first person they see. Willow balks at this, perhaps, you know, he actually takes the quest seriously, and he is a father who understands this, and he doesn't want to just give it to a criminal. And, you know, through happenstances, he meets him later on, and they do wind up pairing up. Weird transition, but I do think it's funny, is like after, you know, him and the only other guy that's left with him, they argue back and forth of whether or not they should leave the baby with this guy, and Val Kilmer talks enough to them that they do start to trust him and think, okay, we can do this, and then they do leave the baby with him, and you don't really know what his intentions are at this point, but at least it's gotten him free.
Right.
He's clearly having doubts, so his friend, it's like time for them to go home, his friend is trying to reassure him, and he says something like, we did the right thing back there. And then like within like the next second, the baby flies over their heads, being carried by an eagle, and the eagle thing is being like piloted by one of these even smaller characters. I think they're called brownies, who are like people that are about this tall. And like he's yelling, I stole a baby. He just yells that. He's like, I just stole a baby, which I think is funny.
Is that Rule that said that?
I can't remember which one's which. Kevin Pollak is one of them.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that was him. I found that out a minute ago.
Yeah, and then we get to our main comedic these 2 characters that wind up tangled with them and stuff. And I can see how they're a bit annoying, but for the most part, they work for me. They were okay.
Yeah. No,
and I did like the idea of like somebody even smaller than Willow.
Yeah.
Actually, Willow wasn't the smallest anymore and stuff, and they get captured by the people, and it's very like Gulliver's Travels. If people are familiar with that, or if they've read that thing about like waking up and having all the people like tied you down, and they meet, I don't know, the brownies seem to serve some sort of like fairy of the forest that gives them a wand, and they're gonna have a chance at this if they return the wand to this famous sorceress. That way she could fight the bad sorceress. So now you get a little extra onto it. It's not just the baby now. Now they also have to this woman, because apparently she's like their only hope in Queen Bevmorda. That's what she's called, Bevmorda. So I'm just trying to get familiarized with the names here. It's Chilandra. Chilandria is the fairy queen, and she gives the wand to them. They want them to give the wand to Finn Raziel. and so they've got that little added bit. But yeah, so I don't know. As we go, there's nothing too original as far as the scenes go, but it's just a good mix because you've got them questing out, and then eventually, you know, what happens when they meet back up with Val Kilmer, because you get one of those sort of like lighthearted bar fight scenes, and he's like posing as a woman so that he can like get away with like sleeping with some guy's wife and stuff, and Sorsha and her soldiers show up to get the baby, and there's a big kerfuffle, and they get to break out. So you get a good variety of the kind of scenes. You have that. You have a nice chase scene. You know, they're being chased on horseback and on wagons and stuff. Later, you've got another sort of chase scene where they're going down a mountain. They're sliding down a mountain being chased. You know, there's various battle scenes and fight scenes. I mean, I think it hits all the right beats. It's a well-told story from that regard. I don't think the movie has any lulls. The movie is just about 2 hours long, which some people might think a bit longish for this, but not really. I don't think there's any lulls. It moves. It has a pretty good lively pace, giving us different characters, giving us different environments. Nice music. James Horner, who is one of the best in the biz, does. I can't praise it as much as I'd like because it doesn't have any tracks that jump out at me but everything flows very nicely.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think it drags just a little in the beginning before it actually, hits the ground running. When they get out and meet Val Kilmer and all that, but maybe just a little trimming there, I think may have helped it out just a little bit. Other than that, yeah,
they probably could have sped up that whole scene where they're deciding upon what to do, where they're talking about that probably could have gone a little quicker.
But it's an epic,
and it's great now. Like, again, this movie's made in 1988, and I know obviously the Lord of the Rings existed way before that, but not in movie form. It's just so great. Like when you first see like him and his little group setting off down toward like this valley and stuff, and the music strikes up. It's just so similar. It just evokes so much of what you would see years later in the Lord of the Rings, and then of course again in The Hobbit and stuff. But this came first, and actually parts of this were shot in New Zealand too. So even back then, they were like they knew that New Zealand would stand in very well for this sort of fantasy setting.
Yeah.
Some really nice locations. Yeah, it's shot primarily in I think Wales and New Zealand is where most of the filming took place. Good. Mad Mardigan. I don't know why I keep forgetting his name, but Val Kilmer's character is Mad Mardigan.
That's a stupid name.
It is a stupid name. I mean, a lot of the names are stupid, but that's probably the stupidest one for sure.
Well,
I mean,
it says it constantly in the movie too.
His name is Willow Ufgood, which seems like a good name, Ufgood. But then, and they say it so many times, like Mad Mardigan, help me! Mad Mardigan, stop! Mad Mardigan, over and over. Some other good names. So. Yeah, and as usual, whenever you have like these sorts of movies where a baby has to be taken care of, like the baby's like good as gold. Like the baby like never cries, even when she's in danger. There's a great shot of like when they're sliding down the mountain, being chased. They're riding a shield down the snowy slope. There's like a close-up shot of like the baby like laughing. So it's like, oh, this baby's having a good time, Willow's a good character though. He takes it very seriously. He's the one always has the ring. He's the one carrying it and stuff, and that's another thing that's good about it. I mean, Willow is the main character aside. They always make sure he's doing stuff important. Mad Mardigan might be fighting off guys with a sword, but that doesn't mean Willow is just hiding or doing nothing. He's always very involved. He does some fighting, and it's done in such a way where it actually seems believable if he like gets out of it or he wins and stuff. And I appreciate that. I think Willow, like you said, it is a good family movie. I saw it as a kid. It's a good movie, I think, for kids. Like, there's nothing. It's not overly dark. It's not overly violent. It has, a level of violence that I think is acceptable for most parents to allow their children to see. Because on the same end, I think it's always good that kids are reminded that violence, it's all bad. I mean, I don't know what I can credit this with, if it was movies or my parents or what. But I mean, no matter how far back in my memory I go, I can't remember a time ever, no matter how young I was, where I didn't know that it would be really bad to like poke someone in the eye with a stick or to cut them. Like I always knew that was bad. I didn't need, like, if it was explained to me, it was explained to me super early apparently, because I can't remember ever like not knowing that. I can't ever remember like watching Wile E. Coyote and thinking, oh yeah, okay, a very early age that violence had consequences. So I don't really mind a certain amount of violence in movies even intended for children, because this does show like sort of consequences. It's like swords are dangerous. You can kill someone with a sword, you know, that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah.
People, I mean, it's a case by case basis what they're comfortable with their children watching, and sometimes children different stuff. But I think, you know, in general, I would recommend this. This is a good movie for kids to watch. Even a kid who's like 7 or 8, I think it's fine. Really, I do.
Yeah, sure. They would balk at this, but probably let them watch like the new, you know, Avengers movie or something.
Mm-hmm. Which is really going for like a more realistic thing. But yeah, I know what you mean. Which is a lot more imitatable in a way. You know, that's the other thing about these fantasy movies is like they're not that imitatable. You can take a stick and say, "Oh, I'm Mad Mario again," and stuff. But again, I don't want to go down too far that path. But to me, at least, as a person who I think has a certain amount of common sense, the movie I think is appropriate for children of most ages. And I also think it's a movie that most kids, I mean, everybody's different, it would hold their attention and they'd like. And I can remember that as myself being a kid, and you know, it certainly held my attention, and I liked it. Whereas, you know, as great as Lord of the Rings are, that's super heavy for, you know, a young kid. A lot of, you know, for every bit that moves along and is great, there's lots of talking too, and that's not a criticism. That's simply the way the movies are. That's why something like this is a lot easier to digest. It's quicker, it's simpler, and it still tells a pretty good story, even if it's not like the most as we said, the most original story or anything, and it's not full of amazing performances or everything. But I think all the actors were pretty dialed into what they were doing, and everything fits tone-wise. Nobody seems that out of place, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, a hell of a cast in here as well. You know, all the supporting cast is just great.
Mm-hmm. It's a good variety of characters is what I like. Like sometimes movies can overload you with too many characters, but this movie doesn't really have to worry about that because all the characters really stand out from each other. You don't really mix them up with each other. They all sort of have their definite, you know, look and what they do and stuff. Like you don't have characters where it's like, well, you didn't need him because you had him, or you know, every character basically served a certain purpose. And again, you can relate them over to Star Wars if you want. Like his friend Eric is obviously like a Lando Calrissian type character, except with a little more responsibility. He's less involved than Vader, but as the Emperor's dragon or whatever, you've got that guy General Kale, who's very powerful and menacing. I was really impressed with him. He was even better than I remembered because like they really play up like how strong and intimidating he is. Like in the end of the fighting, he's just mowing people down, and it's like all like Val Kilmer, Matt Egerton can do to like handle him. It takes him like a lot of effort to take him out, which is cool too. Because I think sometimes when you have movies like this that are, you know, they're more of like a general audience thing where they do have kids in mind. Sometimes when you're getting to like a conclusion or a climax clean and easily, just like to like. This movie's not like that. Like the climax is long, and they have to do a lot of stuff. Like none of it is quick. There's no like quick, easy fixes. And there's parts where it really looks like the good guys are screwed and they're totally going to lose. Because I think in certain movies, I think they feel the need once they get to a point, they have to move it along. It's like, all right, here's where the good guys use their special weapons, and you know, it's like I like that this movie creates some suspense and doubt. I mean, we know our heroes are going to win and stuff, but at least they really earn it, which I like.
Yeah, General Kale, and I love that mask he has.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I said, everybody has a good distinctive look. He has a really good sword too. His sword is really cool and memorable. And they even make a point at one point where Mardigan like picks up one of those swords. I don't know if it's his sword, but somebody else's sword, and like he's fighting with it. And he's actually quite ineffective with it until he pairs it with another sword, and then he starts to win. But Bob Dolman is the one who adapted the screenplay from Lucas's story. It's kind of an interesting thing when you think of it, because he doesn't have very much going on. At the time, what he was best known for was he was a writer on WKRP in Cincinnati.
Whoa.
And he didn't go on to do very much. He did actually wind up directing a few films in the 2000s, which is, yeah. But for a guy that didn't seem to have very much script experience, I think he did a probably good job, because especially knowing what we know now about George Lucas's writing style, you have to feel like he probably, if it had been his own script, it probably would have been a lot more problematic. It was probably good that somebody else adapted, you know. It seems like Lucas is best when his ideas and things are like adapted and done by someone else, because Lucas might be a good storyteller in a general sense, but he's not a writer. I think it's pretty clear.
That's exactly the problem with a lot of his stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and there's people out there that say he's not even a director. I think they're wrong. I think they're forgetting that he was very good and competent director early in his career, and he didn't exactly lose it. It's just that he overindulged himself at certain points. I don't think like he was just somebody that got lucky with Star Wars and wasn't a good director. I think he proved himself to be a good director from the start. But writer, yeah.
What's your favorite Star Wars film?
Direct Empire. I know. Empire. Just like most people, my favorite is Empire. And that's not him, that's Kurtzman.
Mine too. And he didn't write or direct that, did
he? He definitely didn't direct it.
Yeah, I know he didn't direct it. I'm trying to...
Wasn't it Howard Kurtzman? Something Kurtzman, right?
I was just trying to find out the writers. I mean, I know he wrote the characters, but yeah. Kasdan. Lawrence Kasdan wrote the screenplay, and Lee Beckett. But I mean, that's just my point. I mean, you know, that's our favorite and probably most people's favorite Star Wars film that he didn't do either, and I really pissed him off.
I still think THX 1138 and American Graffiti are very well directed movies. It's like,
yeah, I don't disagree with that either. Yeah, I like THX quite a bit.
That's it. So. Yeah, like a lot of people, I can come down hard on Lucas. There's a lot of things to criticize him for, but I draw the line where people are like, he's not even a good director. I think he was a good director who just sort of lost his a little bit, which is kind of understanding when you create one of the biggest phenomenons in movie history. You know,
I think he surrounded himself with people that wouldn't tell him their honest opinion.
Yeah, kind of like Michael Jackson. Thing,
exactly. You know? I mean, it's the same.
He was great, you know. Yeah, just you're a genius, you know. Your artistic genius is amazing, and
then the prequels happened. You know, that's how the prequels happened the way they did, because nobody ever said, "No, George, that's not a good idea."
Yeah, I don't know about this Jar Jar Binks. I don't know about those really offensive Chinese accents. I don't know about.
What about that flying Jewish thing with a trunk, whatever you call it.
that flying Jewish junk dealer with the long nose that haggles over prices. You forget that stuff because you want to put it out of your mind and forget it, and then you're like, oh, it's like that's all real, that's all there, and beautiful HD box sets and stuff for the world to see.
I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to pay for it. I've seen Phantom Menace one time, and I'm never going to revisit it. But all that stuff is just ingrained in my brain because it was just not good.
No. Like, I mean,
whatever.
They were good here and there, but as a whole, you know, just could not stand as a whole for sure.
I have very strong feelings on Star Wars, so I can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do, and I certainly do too, for sure. But yeah, Ford was a cool choice for this. Like I said, it more had to do with him actually sort of being friendly with George Lucas. They'd known each other since the 70s and stuff like that. But it's interesting when you think about what he directed up to that point. He'd done, like I said, a few things that weren't that well known, yeah, but Splash and Cocoon.
Oh, yeah, those are both big movies, though.
Yeah, and Gung Ho, which I don't know. What's that?
Is that the car movie?
No, Grand Theft Auto's the car movie.
No, it's, I think
they're... Oh, yeah, you're right. It's a car plant.
Michael Keaton, right? I've never seen it, but I want to.
Okay, I see now, yes. It's a comedy about an American car plant being taken over by Japanese car. Oh, it was part of that whole Japan takes over the world thing that was going on in the 80s. I see. So, yeah, he was basically an up-and-coming director at this time. He had two pretty good hits. He'd done that. Willow was kind of an interesting choice for him. It wasn't really, I think, until he'd done, like, Apollo 13 that it became, like, that thing where anytime, you know, his name started to really carry weight as a director. Because now, you know, you see Ron Howard's like, Ron Howard's newest film. Because it's like, get ready, because it's Ron Howard. He's won some awards. You know, like, this is way before that.
Like, I don't want to see Da Vinci Code shit. I want to see, Splash, stuff like that. That's the kind of movies I like. I don't know.
The last thing I saw by him wasn't really that big of a deal. It was the Beatles thing, the 8 days a week thing, which
Oh yeah, was that good?
it's good, but I mean, how much credit can you give it to him? He's not really a director at that point. He's more like an editor.
That's true.
All he did was like put footage together and interviews. I can't give him too much credit as a director. I mean, I've never thought he was a bad director, but yeah, I like Apollo 13 a lot, but he got a lot of props for movies that I was underwhelmed by, like A Beautiful Mind, Cinderella Man, Da Vinci Code. Those movies, I don't care about those movies. I don't think they're bad movies. I just don't care about them. They didn't make any impact on me. And I want to see Rush. That's on my Netflix now. The movie about the Formula One racers.
Oh, he did that?
Yeah, apparently. I'm just looking.
Yeah, that's a really good movie.
Yeah, that's definitely on my watch list. But yeah, I think it was probably a pretty smart move by Lucas. Although again, maybe it was just more luck that he got Ron Howard, because apparently at the time Ron Howard was sort of looking for something fantasy, which is kind of interesting. Maybe because of what he'd done with Cocoon, he liked that idea. But I don't know. A few of the reviews I read picked on him a bit for saying like his direction veers off course in some places because there's too much focus on special effects. I didn't get that. Did you think that? I didn't think that.
I didn't really think that it focused on special effects.
No, like they're there, but like it's not like I ever saw a scene where I thought the special effects took precedence over, the action of what was going on. Sometimes I wonder about critics when they write things like that, because I would really like to know what they actually mean behind it. You read the sentence like that, but I don't actually really know what it means. In fact, maybe I can find one of them. One of them I read just on Wikipedia. Deception. Let's see where it said something like, shit, where'd it go? Of his hands full in simply harnessing the special effects. Okay. That's Janet Maslin from the New York Times. Praising Lucas's storytelling, but critical of Ron Howard's direction. But yeah, I don't see that. And then there's a thing down below where somebody compares it to Rob Reiner's Princess Bride. And I don't know. To me, no comparison. Much better than Princess Bride. Princess Bride is a fun little movie for what it's doing, but I think this is a serious movie that is telling a real story. Whereas Princess Bride is sort of just like your cut and paste type show with a bunch of cameos by actors we like. It's kind of how I feel about it. Which I still think is enjoyable. I know that sounds like really snobby, and I don't mean it that way. I still do like Princess Bride. I'm not trying to shit on it or anything like that. I do like it. I just think, like I said, especially as somebody my age group, because people in my age group just never shut up about that movie. It's just like one of those ones. It's supposed to be one of the big ones for people in my age group, and I've never really felt that way myself.
I was just looking at this Roger Ebert review. I know we've talked about him a few times on the show before.
There's a direct reference to several film critics. The two-headed monster thing that he actually makes by accident is referred to. It's not referred to it anywhere in the movie, but outside of the movie, it's referred to. I'll have to find the name later, but it's like it's a mashup of Ebert and Siskel and Ebert's names. And then also that guy we were talking about at the mask. All right, there we go. The big guy in the mask is some sort of reference to some critic too. Let me see here. I read that. Hold on a second. How do I keep losing this stuff? The General Kyle or Kale or however you say it. He was some sort of he was based on the film critic Pauline Kael. A fact that was not lost on Kael in her printed review of the film. She referred to General Kael as an homage à moi. Yeah, okay, here we go. The two-headed dragon was named Sispert, but then they called it Ebersisk. That's what I said. Yeah, that's what I remember. Ebersisk. They did a novelization, and in the novelization it was Ebersisk. But very memorable thing. I mean, like I said, I hadn't seen the movie all the way through since I was young, and all I could really remember was some of the stuff about going down the mountain in the snow, and then the fight with the two-headed Hydra dragon thing, Eberisk. That was all I could really remember. Like, my most clear memory of the movie is the special effect where the troll, very different trolls in this movie. In this movie, trolls are small, hairy ape creatures, where Willow fights off a troll and then uses a spell on it and turns it into, like, this weird, thing with stuff coming out. He's disgusted by it and kicks it down off the wall. It lands in the water. The water turns it into a giant beast. It's a really cool sequence. That's what I remember. That was like the only stuff I could really remember over the years, was like that bit. Like a lot of these movies, it has a bit of a love story going on, and it's not, you know, it's not going to be a deep loving story. It's not going to be a realistic love story. So they just sort of have fun with it. It's kind of funny. But for no reason, those two little guys have like a love potion with them. At one point, one falls on it, and he starts to fall in love with a cat before the cat's about to eat him. And after they've been captured with the baby, and the bad army has them, the bad guys' army has them, and they're making that camp on the mountain. They're trying to escape, and they're about to get away clean, except the problem is that Bad Mortigan has been infected by the love potion, and it makes him fall in love with Sorsha when he sees her, and then so, you know, he could just get out there with the baby, but now he's being overcome by this, so she wakes up and she, you know, pulls the knife on him, and then they have that fun little bit where he starts, like, spouting lines of poetry and saying how much he loves her and wants her and stuff, which is kind of funny, you know. In the earlier scenes, he was talking about how much he hated her at one point.
She tried to kill me.
Yeah, she's walking along. He's like, I was looking at your leg. I'd like to break it. And then there's a later point. And there's a later point in the movie where I think it's a funny line, like you said, where, like, even after they've managed to get away and stuff, he's like, you almost screwed that whole thing up with that love thing, saying all that about loving her. It's like, me in the face. I just think it's a funny line. But it is sort of just a funny thing. Like, it's not realistic, but I mean, it's a love potion anyway. So what do you want from realistic? It's just sort of funny that she's just sort of so baffled by it. And that later, when they take her prisoner, she actually has a conversation with him about it, and he can't really remember it and stuff. And you see that she's actually more mad that it seemed like he was lying. Like, that's what pissed her off. She's like, you said all this stuff, you loved me. You were lying. He's like, I don't know, I don't remember. And then she just runs off, and then from then on, it's sort of that seed of doubt in her mind. And then later, she does fall in love with him, I guess, by seeing how brave he is and what a good fighter he is and stuff. And sure, why not? She's a warrior too, and character even as a bad guy. So I wasn't disappointed. Sometimes when bad guys go good in movies, you're just like, of course, blah. I don't mind it in this. It's okay. I think I kind of like Sorsha. You know, I think it would have been kind of sad to see Sorsha like fall to her death or something, you know, as a bad guy. It's better to see her stand up to her mother, I think.
It is exactly like Han Solo, man.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
because they have the whole love thing going on. Yeah.
Gosh. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I guess, but, you know, now that you pointed out, I didn't really even think about it, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, for God's sakes, Willow's even technically a farm boy. Technically. You want to go down that road.
Mm-hmm. Where were his parents?
And he's actually sort of being trained by an Obi-Wan, although less, because he wants to become a wizard. And he does have to, like, you know, cast spells and believe in himself to make it work, which is a lot like the Force. Because at first, you know, he spells. So we get to the funny stuff, you know, he does eventually, because he's going to part ways with Gafgarian. This is before they get captured. That's like Gafgarian. Sorry, that's a Final Fantasy Tactics character. Matt Mardigan. Because he says, I'll only take you as far as this island, because the island is where he's supposed to meet that the good sorceress, where he can give her wand back. She finds out the whole reason she hasn't been able to, her name is Finn Rezael, and the whole reason she hasn't been able to fight Queen Bevmoria is that she's been turned into a possum from a curse. So,
is that what that is, a possum?
That's what her first form is. It's like a possum. And yeah, and she does wind up changing forms a few times. She has like a funny little voice, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
If you're a wizard, you know, because at one point when she's talking about how she's a woman, she's like, I'm really a woman. A beautiful young woman. It sounds so funny. And at one point later, of course, during that whole castle fight, she's turned her last form. I think she gets turned into a goat. So now she's going when she's talking, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so she does a little bit of the training, I guess, too. But it's sort of the same thing. Like, he has the wand. He should be able to turn her back, but at first he can't. But as he starts to, like, believe in himself and do that, like, because eventually, obviously, towards the end, he does manage to transform her finally, so she can have a cool wizard fight with Queen Bevmorda. I guess the other thing I really remember is, like, before the climax, I really remember the pig transformation, because it's another thing that's a little different from a lot of movies. Because a lot of movies that have, like, the sword and sorcery thing go, if there's, like, a big final fight with armies, it's usually kind of like Army of Darkness or something, where the bad guys are coming, you're defending the castle. In this, they're attacking the castle because they have to go in and get the baby. They're trying to assault the castle, and Beth Moria just laughs them off and turns them all into pigs. So you get some sort of interesting body horror. There's some nice shots of like the guy's hands turning into hooves and stuff, and completely, she's completely evil. She doesn't care that her daughter's turned against. Well, she's mad her daughter turned against her, but she's not going to show her any mercy. It doesn't really matter. But early on in the movie, she had some advisor tell her that he senses that her daughter would betray her, and he's just like, no, she wouldn't. Of course, that's what happens. But yeah, I don't know. Just a good variety of stuff going on. Certain stuff really is on the nose. I mean, the bad guys, they wear all black. Every horse they ride is black. Mm-hmm. They don't ride any brown or white horses, whereas the good guys wear brown and white horses and stuff like that. Ride brown and white horses and stuff. But it's good. It fits.
Yeah. I've got a little bit of an air of nostalgia on this one.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
That you brought up, or I think I may have brought it up, Never Ending Story. Mm-hmm. That was one that I loved as a kid, and then went back and watched with my kids.
It's not aged well.
A few years ago, no, it did not age well. But this one, on the other hand,
it totally holds up. I think.
Yeah, it holds up very well. It's some of the special effects, but you can't really complain about that stuff. But it was like you said, groundbreaking at the time.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, another one of the problems with like fantasy movies, even coming up into that era, was like good. They look kind of cheap. Like this movie at least doesn't evoke that. Like it doesn't look cheap.
It had a hell of a budget.
It had a hell of a budget, and it was pretty well spent for the most part, I think. And you see that, and that's one of the things that separates it from some of the other movies of the decade, and why I think we eventually settled on it. Like I said, I mean, it would have been a little boring to talk about Never Ending Story, because like you said, there's memorable, cool things about it, but as a whole, I don't think it holds up, and it has some things that even to this day now I find actually kind of annoying about it and stuff. And, I don't know very much. I'd recommend the book to anybody. It's really interesting, and the book it is a really great concept too, like which you can't really wrap your brain around in the movie, of it being a never-ending story. It's one of those like fourth wall breaking things, because it like even takes you in as the reader holding the book that you're part of it. It's very well done, and you can't really get that out of the movie. And what's funny is they could have tried to do that in the sequels, and they like made no attempt to. They just went down like a shittier road.
But have you ever read any of the books, these Willow novels?
No, but I was aware of them. I know that George Lucas, he worked with Chris Claremont, who actually wrote the books, and people who might know that name, and then because Chris Claremont was the X-Men writer in the 80s and the early 90s. He was the guy that wrote all those classic X-Men stories that people might be aware of, like the Dark Phoenix saga, stuff like that. Like that's Chris Claremont. Really great writer, really cool. I mean, he had a soap opera-ish style, but I've always really liked it for sure. But yes, he wrote. That was the other thing, and that's why you wonder why a sequel didn't happen, if it had something to do with the decline of the fantasy genre and stuff. Because yeah, they did a lot of like world building in those novels. Apparently, I haven't read them, but they give you some history. They give some history on the characters. They give you more background. Stuff that's barely hinted at in the movie is explored a lot more deeply in these books. So it's something definitely I would like to check out.
Yeah, and because the movie was not as successful as they hoped,
mm-hmm.
they just continued with the books instead.
Yeah, and there was an official novelization of it, but I don't know. It's probably hard to find. It's hard to find novelizations of older movies for sure. I try to collect them when I can, but they're hard to find. Like I would love to get something like that, like the Halloween 2 novelization. That'd be a really cool one to get. You can buy that on like a few $100s, I think.
Oh wow, too much for me.
Last I checked. But
I was just doing the math here on the budget on the inflation calculator. Almost 62 million is roughly what that would translate into.
Mm-hmm. Pretty respectable.
So
not blockbuster, but pretty respectable.
Yeah, I mean that's not so crazy nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Avengers movies, like 200 million? Batman vs Superman was like 200 million, something like that.
Their profits or their budgets?
No, their budgets.
Oh yeah, their budgets are definitely over 200 million because they're thinking they're going to at least double that, right? 400 to 500 million is what they expect from those movies.
There's no reason this movie should cost that much. I guess half of that special effects.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous amount of money. It's a waste.
It really is
such a waste.
I know. I mean, for like every movie we see that costs millions and millions of dollars, like you get where a lot of those millions go, but not all of it. Some of it's just like, where is some of this millions going? And it's just like, I don't know. It's like some union rule, or they're overcharging, or God knows what they're spending on catering or something. You know, like there's just so much stuff going on.
Like Rogue One, like what was the budget on that? Do you have any idea?
Look that up.
I mean, I was just trying to get something to compare this to.
Right. I mean, it's a little different because it's standalone. It's not part of a series, or at least like be the start of one. Rogue One's budget was 200 million, but I mean, it cleared $1 billion worldwide.
Oh, jeez. But I mean, you know, that's because they gambled the right direction. But you know,
yes.
I mean, there's plenty of movies that had inflated budgets like that failed miserably.
Absolutely, yeah.
But man, $1 billion. That is nuts.
Hard to wrap
I mean, just opening weekend, it almost made its budget back. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Willow had a pretty strong opening weekend, and then it fell off, but it's still considered a fairly, at least a modest success. Certainly not a flop. You know, it was a budget of roughly 35 million, came close to 60-some million. So exactly as much as they'd hoped for. I'm sure you always aim a little higher and stuff. But,
yeah, man, it petered off pretty quickly. It's 1, 2, 3.
And some of that has to do with, again, just the year and the timing of like other movies that were going on at the time that probably stole a little bit of its thunder. And you can understand why too, because he wasn't necessarily seen as a big thing. I talk about fantasy and its prevalence in the 80s, but that didn't mean it broke through. Most of these are movies, like even the ones I think are best, are cult classics at best. Fantasy did not break through until post, Lord of the Rings, and now we live in an age where fantasy is finally considered a very popular, viable thing. I mean, there's great movies, there's bad movies, but it's all over the place, and especially the rise of young adult fantasy that's just exploded because of things like Hunger Games and stuff like that. Like now, pretty much any like young adult fantasy series, which is more of a low fantasy because it's usually like real world teen and some sort of weird supernatural forces. It's not like set in another world. Although there have been some attempts at that. One that comes to mind is Christopher Paolini guy, or whatever his name was, who wrote those books, Aragon, about the dragons. He was like 18 or 19 when he wrote the first one. And if you read it, you can really tell it's not that good. And they thought that was going to be a big film franchise. I saw that film in theaters, and it was awful. And that was the end of it. It was just a terrible movie. It was a terrible flop, and that was the end of it. He kept writing books. Maybe they sold, but as far as that getting off the ground as a movie franchise, no.
There's been so many of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. But, I love fantasy. It's like arguably my favorite genre. I get it is in the the broadest definition of the term. It depends upon it, right. Yeah, as far as Willow goes, Willow fits perfectly as the high fantasy thing. It's what most people expect from high fantasy. You've got humans in a dark ages to medieval level of sort of society and technology. You've got magic. You've got magical creatures. Big open world with lots of wilderness and danger. That's usually the high fantasy thing. And besides Lord of the Rings, in recent years, that has not really been attempted, and I can understand why. But I think that's another thing I just sort of respect about Willow. Sure, it's not that original, but at the same time, at least it's high fantasy done well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was more like high fantasy done cheap, not well.
Exactly.
But it's one I've just always I had good memories of, even if they were vague. And now being able to see it again recently has sort of reinforced all that. I would say as a solid movie, an entertaining movie, well done. And again, it's something that you could actually recommend for like younger children to see too, and think that most of them probably would be entertained by it.
Yeah, that's
I've always
another
liked
reason.
Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis is career and stuff, and it's awesome that he got this chance to be a leading actor and stuff. And I mean, he pulls it off quite well. He shows that he's not just again. It's difficult. Yes, he's when you're in that position as a little person, you're basically a character actor. You're going to be typecast. But I mean, he still. Guy thought his acting was like behind the other actors or something. Like he couldn't keep up with Val Kilmer. Like he didn't look like he. I think he plays those scenes. He's right on the same level as the other actors. It's not like he seems like he can't act as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I've forgotten how young he was for the role. Warwick Davis is still only like in his late 40s.
Yeah, he's 47, 46, something like that.
What gets confusing is, so he plays the role of Professor Flitwick in the Harry Potter films, which makes sense. But actually, and it's easy enough to forget, but if you watch the films like back to back and stuff, you'll notice that Professor Flitwick's age fluctuates in the movies. He starts off in I think his first appearance is like in 2 and 3. He's got like white hair and stuff. In later movies, he doesn't have white hair. They put his hair back, so it's kind of funny. And so I think for a while, it kind of threw me off. And I used to think of, I mean, I knew that they had the white, but it still made me think of Warwick Davis as being a lot older than he actually is, just because I was associating with the character. And then they changed the character themselves, which is kind of funny.
Well, have you ever seen him on An Idiot Abroad? Did you ever watch that show?
I watched that show. I didn't see the parts with him. I'll have to.
He was
that's cool.
Maybe season 3, something like that.
Was he funny?
I mean, he wasn't really meant to be, but he was just himself. So he didn't. Yeah. I mean, he didn't look particularly old there. But yeah, he's younger than I thought he was. I would have definitely guessed he was in his 50s now.
Yeah. No, I guess he's 47. So, which is great because I know that like the kind of dwarfism he has is different from a lot of people's, and that leads to health problems and stuff. And and it can be a difficult life. You wonder how old you might get to live in good health and stuff. And he seems to mostly he's had problems with joint pain and stuff like that, but he seems to be reasonably healthy. But he has paid the price for it at certain points. He married another little person, and the first children they had wound up dying because it was like a combination of like what was problematic about his condition mixed with what was problematic with her condition. Both the children had it, and they couldn't survive. They do have 2 children now that have survived, and I don't know what their state is, but yeah, so they had to live through losing 2 children. So I mean, it's a difficult thing.
Do you know if they're dwarfs or if they're dwarves?
I don't think they're divorced.
No, dwarves. I'm sorry.
Oh,
if the children are.
Oh, if the children are. The ones that died certainly were. Hold on, let's see if I can find that out.
I was just curious because I know it's genetic and.
I know one of them has been acting actually. Well, let's see here.
There used to be this.
Annabelle Davis. Let's see, Annabelle Davis.
That name sounds familiar. I don't think she is.
She's been in television. Yes, she inherited, oh God, I cannot say this, spondylopiphyseal dysplasia congenita from her father. Man. Okay, she's definitely a little person because she has a cameo in one of the Harry Potters as a goblin. So yeah, but she's done TV. I have no idea what the dumping ground is, but she's also has a little cameo in Star Wars: The Force Awakens as some creature type thing. So so at least the daughter is a little person for sure.
She's 19.
Yeah. Yeah. They had 2 sons who both died.
I was only asking because there was this reality show, Little People, Big World, something like that.
I know that show. My mom watched it a lot.
I never actually watched it, but I know that they had one son that had the disorder and one that didn't. I think they may have been twins, actually.
Yeah. But, they had one son. Yeah, they had several children, and one of them was normal sized. But I saw a bit of that.
I mean, he was like 8 and, a foot taller than the parents already. So it was just kind of interesting.
Warwick Davis, of course, would go on to become Leprechaun in all those movies.
That's what I was going to mention. I remember seeing a Leprechaun for the first time in the early 90s and being like, that's Willow.
Yeah. I mean, they're pretty stupid movies, but I mean, again, I give credit to Warwick Davis. He has fun with the role. Why not?
Well, just think he was in his early 20s when he did the first
I know,
Leprechaun movie.
and he seems a lot older.
He
I mean,
does.
some of that's makeup, obviously.
But
But
he,
yeah, it's always
yeah,
hard to tell. Again, I don't mean to make a generalization or say anything offensive, but it is harder to tell, at least for me, the age of little people. Some look younger, some of them look older. It's it's kind of all over the place. But he's going to be in Rogue One. Oh, he's in Rogue One also as something. I don't know what he is, but he's in Rogue One. But yeah, I think he's carved out a pretty cool career for what he has to work with and stuff like that. I mean, I realize that like when you're in that sort of position, whether or not you're a little person, whatever. I mean, it's the same thing with any sort of minority, right? Like we go back far enough, black actors, right? The first time like black actors were getting roles, the only roles they got were the whole point was Sidney Poitier, where he was the black guy, and that was a huge part of the plot. It's like he's the black guy in this situation, and then we finally got to a point where now, for at least most of the time, being a black character in the movie just doesn't mean you're a black character. It just means you're a character. It doesn't have to do with that. And it's been the same thing with other groups too, like gay characters, right? You have the gay characters, and they're stereotypical, and if there's going to be a gay character, it's all about how they're gay. And now finally we're getting to a point where, no, sometimes gay characters are just characters, And it's even harder, of course, to do with a little person because little people are much more rare, and they're instantly identifiable in what they are. So I sympathize with somebody like Peter Dinklage, who I know for many years cast, and he didn't want to be put into roles that he thought would be demeaning or humiliating, and I understand all that. And I have no idea what his opinion on Warwick Davis is, but I would hope he wouldn't think that Warwick Davis ever, just like pandered or anything like that, because I don't think Warwick Davis did. I don't think Warwick Davis ever accepted a role where he thought, this is just, making fun of me as a little person. This is me taking some stupid, demeaning role. I mean, something Leprechaun. To me, Leprechaun's good fun. I don't think it's something that would demean little people. I hope not. I can't speak for this, but I hope that within that community, Warwick Davis, I hope that he's respected and the people like him and like what he's done.
Yeah, Peter Dinklage is kind of the spokesperson for dwarfs.
Sure, and he seems like a cool guy. He's a good actor.
I think I would forget that he was if they didn't mention it like every 3 minutes on Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
But no,
that's the thing that's sort of funny. Like he wants that. You see why it's such a great role for him in some of the conventions it breaks. But yeah, within the context of the stories, it's like it's a very mean world where of course they're constantly going to point that out. I mean, being a woman is constantly pointed out in fucking Game of Thrones.
That's true.
It's supposed to be that sort of thing. It's like you're only a woman, like because that's the world they've created, right? But like as you said, yeah,
he's reminded that his massive head like killed his mother when he was born, like every 10 minutes on that show.
Yeah.
So sure. But other than that, I probably would forget because he's an amazing actor.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
You can't dispute that. And, you can't just, I don't know if a movie would sell if you just cast it and didn't make a point to comment on it. And
that's what I mean. Like as much as you want across the board, quality and stuff like that, it is always going to be a roadblock and I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And I mean, I still like to think that we've made a lot of good strides in that thing, and I'd like to think Warwick Davis was part of that. I mean, okay, yeah, guess what? A little person can never be cast as James Bond, right? That role is not available to them. But I don't think that's a tragedy, and I don't think that's something that a little person is going to get too down on. I think most little people sort of accept the world the way it is, and as long as people aren't, ignorant bastards around them, I don't know. I don't want to start making all sorts of weird points and going off topic and stuff. Mostly, I just wanted to say Warwick Davis was kind of a trailblazer, I think, in some ways for that, and I would just hope that within that community that that they like him for it. To me, until Peter Dinklage came along, Warwick Davis was the most famous little person in the world. He had to be,
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't know. I mean, and I would never say anything about the choices various little people have made with their acting jobs and stuff. There were probably people that came down on like Vern Troyer for roles he took.
Sure, I'm sure
saying,
they did.
Saying, oh, that's like demeaning and stuff like that. Then I don't know. It's not my place to comment on that and stuff.
It's easy to say stuff like that, but you still have to make a living.
Exactly.
So I mean, if you're a working actor, you can't just be turning down roles.
Mm-hmm.
And
the truth is, I mean, it's sort of. I'm not saying every little person, you're small and unique and you're like a freak, so you should just go out and try to be in movies and stuff. But it is true that little people are needed for movies, and it's also true that just because of the way the world is, and it's not me again saying, oh, a little person can't do this, they can't, but a little person can't work like on an oil rig, But I mean that little people big world. I mean, they're very talented, professional, capable people. Like she's a doctor, and I can't remember what he did and stuff, but they're very more than competent, I'm sure, and stuff like that. But I'm also saying, I think it's still a good avenue that that the world of movies needs little people.
Sure.
So yeah.
Man.
And I just think, to me, Warwick Davis was like the big trailblazer, and it was great that he was it's like, here's a movie, and you are the star, a side character and stuff like that. I mean, and as much as I love Lord of the Rings movies and how well they're done, and I'm not saying they should have done them differently, but at the end of the day, none of those hobbits are little people. There's digital stuff there. They have little people stand-ins, but the actors themselves are not little people and stuff.
Right.
This is a legit movie where there's no trickery, there's no stand-in. The little person is the role, and he's the main draw, which I think is a really great thing. I mean, it could have been a terrible, forgettable movie, and that wouldn't have been very good for it. But it's a good movie. It stands out as a good movie, and I like it a lot. And I've always really liked Warwick Davis. And I guess I can understand now why he was on that show, because he's in a sitcom about himself that Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant wrote.
Oh, really?
It's called Life's Too Short. It's like a fictionalized version of his life. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I didn't realize that existed.
Yeah. Speaking of Stephen Merchant, it's so weird. I saw Logan last week, and he's in that, and it is actually a really good role for him. By the way, in case anybody was wondering, I don't feel any differently about it than the rest of the X-Men movies. I think it was crap, and it was an insult, and I don't know why everybody likes it.
Logan? Really?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean,
wow, that's the worst comment I've heard about it so far.
It has a lot of good things, but like I said, like Hugh Jackman is good in it. It's kind of an interesting story, but I mean, it's just a fuck you to people like me, even more so. In the movie, Wolverine literally picks up X-Men comics and says how they're bullshit. I mean, can you get any more of a slap in the face than that? And I don't know if I don't want to spoil the movie, but the ending is horrifying.
Oh, really? You didn't like the ending?
No, God.
I haven't seen it. I don't know what happens. I just know it's a big deal.
No. I get what they were doing, but to me, I want my Wolverine in his yellow spandex who says ain't and flamin' and darlin' and is like, I get that not everything has to be the same, and I get that. And speaking of little people, I get it. It's like, well, we can't have Wolverine be some short guy, even though he is. But I mean, 6 foot something Hugh Jackman is a little much for me. But I'm not blaming Hugh Jackman for this. He gives a really good performance. It's kind of an interesting story. But the other thing is, like, I don't know why people are so thrilled about it being R-rated in the action. It's still just Wolverine fighting mooks. I mean, I would have liked to have seen Wolverine fight Cyber, or Wolverine fight Omega Red. But all it is, oh, look, here's guys with guns, and Wolverine puts his claws into them. Over and over and over again. Like, to me, I don't understand why you have comic book characters that have powers and are larger than life, and then they do things like that. It's boring. And that's what the whole movie is. It's just him, like, mowing down. There are some cool bits in it. Like, for instance, I don't want to spoil things too much. And I won't spoil Stephen Merchant, but I was really pleased that I picked out who he was. But I'll tell you one thing, because this isn't a big spoiler or anything, I promise. It's just that the movie, and I don't know who the actor is, and I was really pleased with what they did with the character, because in the comics, he's just sort of a hateful lunatic. And in the movie, they made him a little more interesting. Nod to him. He has, like, when he's introduced, he has, like, a robot hand. And I thought, is that Pierce? And it was. And I was like, wow, I'm good. That's Pierce. But yeah, in the comics, there was a group called the Reavers, which were a bunch of hate-monger humans that would cybernetically enhance themselves so they could fight humans. And yeah, Pierce was sort of the leader of them. Yeah, and in the comics, he's just sort of a lunatic. In this, I like the guy that plays him. He's like this guy with kind of a cool Southern drawl, and he's kind of interesting. So it's not like everything about the movie was bad. The girl gives a good performance. Killed to somebody like me. It's the exact same thing as all the X-Men movies. It's not imaginative. It's like, oh, mutants. Oh, let's fight humans. And again, Wolverine is literally calling the comics bullshit. And then, so.
I always wanted a proper Sabretooth, to tell you the truth.
Would have been nice.
As I do not like the one that was in the first Wolverine movie. And I also don't like Tyler Mane and one of the...
Liv Schreiber played him in something. I didn't see it. I've heard Origins is really bad. I've just never seen it. And that's by the people that like these movies, and they say Origins bad, so I've never gone near it.
It was bad for sure. But I don't know. I'm such a huge Wolverine fan, though, that that's why I haven't seen the movie, because I've been let down like 3 times in a row. And
that's what I mean. I'm a really big Wolverine fan, and to me, this is just sort of an insult.
Yeah, well, I'll just wait and give it a watch when it comes out on.
I get why certain people like it, and it definitely is more well written and well performed than a lot of those other X-Men movies. It definitely has that over it. I just really hate the story and the things they do and stuff a lot. And like I said, I'm just sort of bored of watching Wolverine kill mooks with his claws. Like, I mean, one thing that's kind of nice, at least about the Avengers movies, is they've finally sort of moved away, because it's true, because this does start in the comics. All of it starts in the comics, but one of the best things about Spider-Man is that, yes, eventually, but after Spider-Man had been a character for over 25 years, Venom was introduced. Venom was a really great villain, and a really good bad guy that was fun to see him fight. Mm-hmm. But before Venom, Spider-Man did not fight people that had powers anywhere similar to him. And that was cool, and that was nice. But yet, to get everything off the ground in the movies, and they finally got it away with it, they had to do other world building. Iron Man and Iron Man had to fight a guy in another big metal suit. Another shrinky guy. It's just like, why would you keep fighting people that have the exact same powers or skill set as you? It doesn't make any sense.
It's like Ant-Man, too.
That's what I said, Ant-Man. He winds up having to fight another shrinky guy in a shrinky suit. And it's just sort of like that over and over again. What I like about Spider-Man is that Spider-Man would fight Dr. Octopus, and he would fight Electro, and he would have to use his powers against their powers. And that's, again, what sort of happens in Wolverine. I don't want to spoil too much. He does fight something that's not just a mook, fighting himself type thing, and you're just
another Project X thing.
Yeah, okay, I'll say there's like an evil clone of him. He basically fights like an evil clone of himself. So then you just have 2 Wolverines going stabbing each other, and it's just not interesting. It's like Wolverine has all sorts of cool villains, and I mean, I do like the similar power thing. It works here and there. Like, I like Spider-Man Venom. I like Daredevil Bullseye, which is different powers, but same kind of skill sets. So that has its time and place, but you don't need to see it over and over again in the movies. It's like we have all this variety, and yet everybody's matching up exactly like that. So
I agree.
Now we're moving into like the other Avengers movies, and they're finally, fighting people with different powers and stuff, which is nice, but it took forever to get there.
It's like they're afraid to try to do that, especially out of the gate. It's like, okay, we're doing Spider-Man. He's got to fight Green Goblin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but let me ask you this: what did you think of Omega Red and Iron Man 2? I think it was.
Well, isn't that Whiplash? I wish.
Was that Whiplash?
That's
okay.
Whiplash.
See, I don't like that movie very much. So,
yeah.
Is that Mickey Rourke?
Yeah, it's Mickey Rourke. That's a really odd movie when you think about it, because it like changes. It's like, okay, here's Mickey Rourke, Whiplash, and he has to fight Whiplash, and they have like an unsatisfying fight. And then later, like, the main part of the movie isn't really Whiplash anymore. It's him and War Machine fighting a bunch of drone things, which, again, is too similar. It's like, here's 2 guys in the Iron Man suits shooting a bunch of robots that look like Iron Man, But, Whiplash was never that great of a villain anyway, Yeah,
I'm pulling up some images here. I've kind of blocked it all out of my mind. I just assumed that was Omega Red.
Yeah, no. Omega Red is definitely a Wolverine / X-Men villain. It would have been really weird to put him in there.
No,
but yeah, he is Russian. I see why you get the other thing, right? Because they had Mickey Rourke with the thick Russian accent, right? Which is very Omega Red, but I don't know. Yeah, he was still pretty shitty. He just had metal things on his hands and went,
It's a great villain, though. Omega Red.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Terrifying. Like Wolverine has some really good, scary villains, and I realize there'd be a challenge in bringing him to the big screen, but I still think it could be done, considering what we've seen. But
I
yeah,
think it can be done. I didn't like the casting of Hugh Jackman to begin with.
no,
He's kind of grown on me a little, but
I give him
still.
a lot of credit. He gives a really good performance in this movie. I shit on Hugh Jackman. I don't think he should be there, and I don't like the writing, but I will say it because people say he gives a great performance. He does. He gives a really good performance in Logan. Absolutely, he does. I can't take that away, but I just mean, and I get why it's problematic to cast a much smaller person. I'm saying you don't have to do the 5'3", but at least make him like 5'8", 5'9". Like make it at least make it clear that he's smaller than most like adult men.
Stocky, Hugh Jackman's not a stocky guy.
No. And I mean, I give credit to Hugh Jackman again. He worked out like nuts for those movies. You know, he has like big muscles and stuff, which is good and works well for the character, sure. Yeah. But I don't know. They had all these Wolverine movies, and all he does is fight mooks or other people with claws, and it just gets repetitive.
Yeah.
Like the most I'm trying to think of like the most interesting fighting he does through all those movies. And we don't even see it. And that's like when he like cuts off the Sentinel's head in X-Men 3. And that's like off screen. Comes down with the head. It's like, oh, we didn't even get to see him jump up and do it. But yeah, I know that everybody is just what a great movie Logan is. And I'm not trying to say it isn't. I'm saying it's so not for me. And I shouldn't have been tricked. I didn't like any of the X-Men movies to this point at all. The only one I even liked a little bit was First Class, and that was only because it was a little bit of like a spin-off. It wasn't really like the main thing. And so I thought that was okay. I hate all the other X-Men movies. They make me sick. I hate them that much. And this is still part of all that. So why should I have thought, oh, well, this is going to fix everything? It doesn't at all. It just...
No. I don't know. I'll still check it out eventually.
Oh, yeah, I love Wolverine, and I hope in my lifetime I'll see Wolverine who's not 6 feet tall and who will actually wear a mask.
Oh, he has to wear a mask.
It would be nice. Wow. I mean, it's not even like it's a secret identity issue. It's just part of his getup. Get it? I don't know. That's what's weird. It's like, I never understood the movie industry's relationship with comic books beforehand, and now that it's become a big thing, I still don't really understand it, because it still seems like they want to shy away from certain aspects. I'm just like, well, why did you think it would be a good movie in the first place? Because it's just like, okay, we got all these great characters with powers, but they shouldn't wear costumes. They shouldn't fight anybody except ordinary humans. Like, I don't understand that sort of thing. Just like I said, the biggest thing was definitely the Superman thing, right? It was okay the first couple times, but by the time they got into like the 90s and stuff, why was Superman still like fighting Lex Luthor? You know, fought Doomsday and died and been to other dimensions and other planets and traveled through time and all these things. And it's like, oh, look, Superman's going to fight Lex Luthor because Lex Luthor wants to do some sort of land deal. You know,
that right there is more tired than anything we've talked about.
Superman?
I'm so tired of Superman and Lex Luthor. Like, I'm so tired of that.
That's why I don't hate Man of Steel. A lot of people hate Man of Steel. I can't. He gets to kick the shit out of Zod. Finally. And all people did was complain about it. They're like, but look at all the destruction he caused. I don't care. He's finally letting loose. He doesn't even throw a punch in Superman Returns. And let's face it, even though I kind of like Superman 1 and 2, the fighting is not exactly anything to feel satisfied about. You know, he fights Zod in Superman 2 too, if you want to call that fighting. But I mean, at least fight some fellow Kryptonians and really let loose and show what their powers can do and stuff. And all people do is like, oh, Superman's killing people.
Yeah, look at how many people died. Which that's what Batman vs Superman is all about. Mm-hmm. Like the aftermath of that, which is...
And yet they answer it with a Batman who kills people. So, because at first when I thought, okay, I get it. Batman doesn't kill people. Batman is upset that all these people got killed. Then I find, oh no, this Batman totally kills people. So why is he upset again? Because he doesn't seem to mind collateral damage in the slightest. And he's so angry. I mean, I know we could do this forever, but that scene where he and Superman fight, shit out of him. Not only is he beating up Superman, which is fine, they have fought in the comics, but he is fighting him with such rage and hatred that I'm just horrified to see this is Batman. This is Bruce Wayne. He's ready to take a big kryptonite spear and put it right through Superman's face, and he's just, it was very upsetting. I found it very upsetting watching it. I don't think I'll ever watch that movie again, even though I'm kind of interested in the longer cut, even though I know it won't make it any better. That movie actually upsets me.
I've heard that.
I knew I'd get onto a big thing by mentioning Logan. Better. Yeah, maybe.
I've heard that. So
it's possible. I mean,
if you want to
so I can
take one for the team, I'd love to hear what it's like, because I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah. I don't know. So upsetting. I can't speak for all people that like comics or anything, because I read plenty of people are like, yes, this is the gritty Batman that's like from the Dark Knight Returns. Can't we keep in perspective that as good as the Dark Knight Returns is, it's still not really normal continuity? That's not the Batman that we see every day. That's a special thing Frank Miller did for a possible future. It's great. It's awesome. What we think Batman should be from now on. So, and just there's people that are just like, this is the good, gritty Wolverine story we wanted. I guess it's gritty, but is it really Wolverine? I don't know.
Good?
Is it good? It's not like it's a bad movie. Good performances. The story, I get what they're doing with the story. It's kind of interesting. It's a very hard movie for someone like me to talk about, because I really don't like it, but I understand the things about it that are good and that people would like. I don't think you'd like it, but I think you could sort of see it the way I do. You could see, Hugh Jackman's giving a good performance. There's some sort of cool stuff going on. But at the end of the day, the story that's actually being told, the things that actually happen, that they just piss me off.
I don't want to get into a whole thing here. I mean, I guess we are already in the middle of a thing.
We did. It's all right.
When I was a kid reading comics, there was nothing I wanted more than for it to be on the big screen. And now it's, commonplace, and I don't like it. I don't like what they're doing. I don't like a lot of these movies that people are going crazy over. I mean, I like the Nolan Batman movies, okay. But other than that, man, I don't really like it. I mean, they're fun to watch and throw away, but I'm not going to go back and rewatch these things.
I like most of the Marvel Studio movies, which is interesting because they're basically about Marvel characters I'm not as interested in. I was never a big Avengers guy, right? I really like the Cap movies. I really do like the three. Yeah. Really like those. The Avengers movies are better than I probably thought they could be in a way, because I thought these will be impossible. But I can't love them. I've never been a big Iron Man fan. I definitely agree that Robert Downey Jr. was a really good choice and plays it really well and stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not as interested in Iron Man. So I think they're okay movies. It was really good. The second one was disappointing. And the third one is, I admire the chances it took, but it didn't seem necessary. But I do like some of the things they've done with the Marvel Studios. So I'm kind of looking forward to the Black Panther movie, to tell you the truth. Don't care at all about Guardians of the Galaxy. They mean nothing to me. Guardians of the Galaxy mean nothing to me. I mean, they're fun movies, but the whole point of them is they're for people that don't know any of this stuff, and that's fine. I'm not reading Guardians of the Galaxy comics, and if I was years ago, it has nothing to do with these movies. The comics that exist now in the movies, that team we see in Guardians of the Galaxy, that never actually existed until they made it up. Those characters existed, but they didn't necessarily exist as that team, and that's fine. Everybody, but a lot of people looking forward to Guardians too. I don't care at all.
I'm not looking forward to it. I mean, I'll watch it.
I guess I want to see if they'll do some Infinity Gauntlet stuff. Sure. The X-Men movies and Spider-Man movies they make me sad. They really do. All of them. Because and that's what I mean. That's why I really love that Marvel Studios could get a hold of those characters, because they'd have to do better than what Fox and Sony did.
Well, they have Spider-Man now, right?
Yeah, and he seems okay. I mean, although I'm getting a little tired of seeing baby Spider-Man. It'd be nice to see grown-up Spider-Man that I'm used to, where he's at least 25. I mean,
They're 18, for God's sake.
Please keep this actor so that when we make Spider-Man movies, he'll actually will age, instead of going, we got to get a new actor and reboot it again. Okay, fine. You picked your actor. He's young. Let's do some movies with him. That's what I hope. They already have way too much Tony Stark influence on him, which I hate, which would actually sort of happen in the comics, but in a different way.
He's 20, so I don't see him getting any bigger than he is now. He's baby Spider-Man forever.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Spider-Man's not a big guy. He's like 5'10",
yeah.
but
he's 5'8". This dude, so not too far off.
I don't know. I know people don't have it burned into their brains, like sizes and body types the way I do, but yeah, I do. It's all burned into my brain, their size and body type. And since it's easier to get away with in the comics because different artists can draw differently, right. But to me, if you're bringing it into the real world, then you really have to follow it.
Well, that's what I start with when you know,
Superman is 2 inches taller than Batman. He has to be taller than Batman. Wonder Woman is very tall as a woman goes. She's probably about 6 feet at least. Mm-hmm. You know, like these things matter to me. You're like, but they do. Like I have to see these people standing next to each other.
Well, you find someone that fits that physicality, but can they act? You know, and then you have that whole process to go through. And
I realized how hard this would be. Like I said, as much as there'll probably never be a Moon Knight movie, but if there was, I only trust myself to write it. The other thing is, how fucking hard would it be to get somebody that could play Moon Knight? Possible, man. Because not only is he like a certain physicality, he's a white guy, he's about 6'2", he's bulkier than Batman, he's about 225, fine. But then you have to play this guy that has like multiple personalities to the point where like he really believes he's these different people and stuff. Like that's not an easy thing to like for an actor to play. So he would be really hard. Right now, I'm enjoying the Iron Fist show. It's a little weird that he's got curly hair, but the rest is it's a little slower than the others so far. Like it's taking a long time to get somewhere.
I haven't watched it yet. I've heard some complaints about it.
It's a little bit boring in places. Like it's taking too long. Like Daredevil had a slow approach, but it still felt like more was happening. That's my main thing. I'm okay with the casting and stuff, and I don't mind that they've made up this idea that the hand has something to do with Kunlun. Fine. It ties in better. I get it. It's simplifying. Fine. With the hand, which is fine. It's not like Iron Fist never did deal with the hand, but if you're just going to be like really, on the ball about it, well, no, the hand didn't really have much to do with Kunlun. Association from Japan ones, But anyway, I don't mind them making that connection. It'll connect to the Daredevil stuff better. I'm happy with the connections and stuff. My only problem is it has like lulls where it doesn't seem like enough is happening. I'm coming into the 8th episode, the 13 episodes. Things I think are going to really pick up. Mm. And I'm not happy with the Iron Fist effect at all. His hand just is like, it looks like see-through glowy. Like there should be some shine coming off it, like in the comics, and there's not. Mm. A bit of a flame around it, and we're not getting that.
I'm not really familiar with that character, to tell you the truth.
I love that character. I got into him in a big way just over 10 years ago. Because I didn't know as much about him either, and then like I don't know, but yeah, he's actually become one of my favorite characters in the last few years. So this just sort of worked out in a way. So I was really like when I heard about them, I was like, love Daredevil. Luke Cage is okay. Hate Jessica Jones. I'm really happy. But I still like the Jessica Jones show.
Yeah.
I've talked about it a million times, my weird relationship. But
that Netflix original stuff is probably some of the best superhero.
Oh, absolutely. The Daredevil is the best I've seen.
I mean, yeah.
It's the best. I haven't seen anything as good as that. And the other stuff is not quite as good as the Daredevil, but it's still very much there. And I'm very interested in seeing it tied together in Defenders. Doing that. And as the more, this is the 4th show, and the more shows you see, the more little connections happen. Like you get a little Iron Fist right at the end of Jessica Jones, because at the end of that, Claire, who's sort of the main character that ties them all together, that's what they're really using. Rosario Dawson. Mm-hmm. She like connects everything. Although she's not very important in Jessica Jones, she's super important everywhere else. Anyway, at the end of the Luke Cage series, Rosario Dawson a self-defense flyer off like a telephone pole, and it's for a class taught by Colleen Wing, who is one of the main characters of Iron Fist and stuff. And already she's totally involved. Like Claire's running around with them now, and she's totally involved. Colleen Wing is one of the most underrated characters in comics, so it's nice to see her being used here.
Well,
she's like a samurai girl.
Yeah, I need to watch that.
But yeah, it's definitely good. I'm just gonna say, like, it seems a little slow. I think a lot's gonna. I think they're gonna like cram a lot into the last like 3 or 4 episodes, Because I feel like they kind of took long. Like the first day, good stuff happens, but it has slow moments where it's like, okay, you could probably do more. Sort of how I feel. But like I said, so far this Danny Rand's okay. I mean, they changed some little things, like the ideas that he had a plane crash instead of actually hiking through. But that's fine. I don't mind it. But the fighting looks good, and that's really one of the most important parts. It actually looked like real kung fu, which I felt fine about because the fighting is so good in Daredevil. I was sure they could do this.
It's the same people
I hope they
working on
it. Not entirely, but I have to imagine some of them. I mean, it's different writers and directors. When they're doing like stunt coordination and fight scenes, it's probably the same people. I don't know why they'd use different people, especially for the Iron Fist and Daredevil stuff, because they're both they're not punching people through walls like Luke Cage can do.
Right.
Technically, Iron Fist can do that, but he can only do that like once or twice. Iron Fist doesn't have superpowers per se. He's just a great martial artist, but he can summon the Iron Fist, and then he has super strength for like one blow. But then he has to like recharge his chi and stuff. And they do have one really good shot in the trailer of him doing one of the best things he's always done in the comics. Is one moment where there's a whole bunch of people and he punches the floor and the floor goes. That's like his like main thing. Like every superhero has their thing that they do. It's like punching the floor and like making everybody fall down or breaking the floor or something. So he's going to do that at some point. I'm totally psyched for it. I knew once I talked about Logan, we get onto a whole thing about superheroes and sort of
yeah.
And I don't need to do that. I like to keep our episodes more tight and focused on
the same with Star Wars, man. We mentioned Star Wars.
Forgettable. Yeah, well, I guess we'll finish up on Willow before we take all night. But yeah, holds up. Good effects. And I don't know. I just always found the fantasy landscape in the 80s really interesting. And even though we're in sort of a renaissance, it's not the same at all. It's a very different sort of fantasy landscape that we're in now, where we focus on different stuff. Or something like Willow or something that else is like high fantasy outside of Lord of the Rings is almost unheard of. Swords and sorcery, almost unheard of, unless it's like just some bullshit nobody cares about, like Scorpion King. They didn't really put much effort into some of these. Like, I don't know, like they did a movie called like Immortals that I tried to watch and I got bored like watching. I think they even made a sequel to it or something. And they did a Clash of the Titans remake, but I haven't seen that. Like, as far as I know, nobody liked those movies. Like, I didn't hear much about them.
They made 2 of those Clash of the Titans movies.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I was probably mixing up. It's probably just one Immortals. And now one came out not too long ago called like Gods of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
Which must have had a huge budget. It looked like it was a really expensive movie, but as far as I know, nobody liked that or saw that.
Was that the Ridley Scott?
Oh, was it really? Yeah, I think, yeah, that's right, because he made everybody mad when he said that thing about whitewashing. Can't cast Muhammad, what's his name, or whatever, because nobody would go see it,
Oh, it was all white dudes in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's what he was saying. He was just saying it's not realistic for me to like cast like Middle Eastern people because they're not, those names won't draw people in and stuff.
Yeah, but
I don't mean to put myself above other people that watch movies, but honestly, yes, there's actors I like, and sometimes if I hear an actor I like is in a movie, it makes me more interested. But I am not stupid enough that if a role calls for something, known to do it, I'm going to be mad. Because I'd be like, well, that makes sense. Okay, Gods of Egypt. Let's have some Egyptian or Middle Eastern people in it. I'm all in.
Exactly. I totally agree.
To me, you don't have to put Matt Damon in a movie about the Great Wall to sell the Great Wall to me. It might be good without Matt Damon. I don't think, well, there better be like an A-list white actor in there to hold my attention on this Great Wall stuff. I think the movie-going public needs.
I just saw Ghost in the Shell for the first time last week.
The animated movie?
Uh-huh.
Right. Yeah.
And because I want, I didn't know anything about it. I had never seen it before. And, I don't know why Scarlett Johansson has got to be in the movie. I mean, other than, exactly the same thing, name draw. But, I mean, who's going to go to see her? I mean, I know a select group of men probably would, but, I mean, why? I mean, why not an Asian actress?
She is playing a character whose name is Motoko Kusanagi. Unless, I guess, maybe they change it for the sake of the movie. But, I mean,
the plot is different already. I can tell from the trailer because
Yeah, because there's like you were in an accident and stuff.
exactly,
Like,
yeah,
an accident. What? I'm like, we're supposed to be far enough in the future that this is just a normal thing.
yeah.
Like it's not like she is like a special agent who does stuff. Like actually, like I'm really happy about the animated movie because honestly, I love the manga. It's a great manga, and
Uh-huh.
it is so hard to figure out what's going on half the time.
Really?
Notes too, and those don't help. They just make things even worse in a way. Like it's not like it's bad or anything. It's just that Masamune Shiro, who wrote this, he's a really smart guy. Like a lot of writers are smart, but he's a really smart guy who actually knows a lot about science and stuff too. So there's a lot of stuff in the Ghost in the Shell manga, just sci-fi, right? Like it's made up, but a lot of it isn't too, and it's above somebody like it's over my head. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Ghost in the Shell that I have no idea what's going on, and there's a little end note, and it doesn't help me at all. It just makes things worse and stuff. The thing that's kind of so I kind of appreciate about the anime is like it's a very short movie. It's like maybe 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And it just goes like that, and and it doesn't get bogged down. And again, I don't think the manga is bad or suffers from being bogged down. I just think they went the right way with the anime. Yeah, they're already
I wanted
doing
more,
something.
Man. It
I
ended.
will say, like
when
I've seen the previews on TV, they are at least paying attention to the visual style, and it looks, and I can, they show a part that's like verbatim out of the anime,
exactly,
like that whole part where like knocking the guy into the shallow water and stuff. And they got the guy, so they're paying attention to some of it. But yeah, why couldn't it have been like that actress who was in the Del Toro movie that everybody likes that I don't, even though I like Del Toro, the robots. Pacific Rim.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's a great Japanese actress in that. I think she could have been good. And I mean, there's even like a video that I saw on YouTube like months ago, like where they're trying to talk about like the whole whitewashing thing and people like overreacting to it. Where like they were on like the streets of Tokyo or something, and they were showing Japanese people like pictures of Scarlett Johansson. Like, do you think like it's a problem that she's going to be Ghost in the Shell? And they've got all these people saying, oh no, and they're like, oh wow, she's really beautiful and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you're showing us that footage, but I'm sure there's all sorts of footage of the people that are. And the other thing too is just like, that's a huge misconception about Japan too. Everybody thinks, oh, you're from Japan, you're totally into manga and anime. No, it's it's a little bigger over there than it is over here, but it's not just like every single most of the people they talk to there, maybe they never even heard of Ghost in the Shell. We have this weird misconception in the West where we just think that if you go to Tokyo, you've got like everybody like
it's Pokemon everywhere.
Yeah, and all this stuff like that. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but there's all sorts of people. People are people. It doesn't matter if they're Japanese. They just don't have an interest in that. They're like, oh, well, I don't read comics or I'm not into sci-fi. They exist in Japan too, for Christ's sake. So yeah, so they're trying to make this big argument through this video that's not such a big deal, and it's a smart thing to do. I don't know. The type of thing that makes me like, I bet you Scarlett Johansson's a really nice person, but I'm tired of her being shoved down my throat, so it's starting to make me dislike her personally, which isn't very fair. I finally saw that movie, Her, and when I heard her voice come on, I wanted to like vomit. I was like, really? She's in this as the voice? She has to be everywhere, that even for a computer voice we have to use? Like, I was so mad. By the way, I did not like that movie. I thought it was really, I don't know, up its own ass. That was I guess the movie thought it was really smart. It thought it was really high concept, and I just didn't think it was.
The other day, because something I was watching had the original voice that they overdubbed with Scarlett Johansson.
There was a different voice to begin with. Wow.
Yeah, another lady, and shit, I can't remember who.
So
it
what?
was.
They changed it because of test audiences or something? They're like, we better have super hot Scarlett Johansson, and even though she's not actually going to be on screen at any point.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I don't have a problem with Scarlett Johansson. I just don't like seeing her in everything.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I'm starting to actually dislike her, which isn't really her fault, because she's just everywhere. And it's just like, well, she is the person for this, and the other thing. I'm like, no, she's not. And this even goes back to Black Widow. She's not Black Widow. And if she is Black Widow, can't she at least attempt a Russian accent? No? But yeah, I'm really conflicted about seeing the movie. I kind of want to see it,
I
Even
do
though
too.
part of me wants to also shed this sort of reputation I have, and I kind of want to shed the idea that I'm not open-minded about adaptations and that I can only like comics and I can only like anime, you know, Americanize it or whatever you want to call it, that it's all shit. Can be done. But they're not winning me over with Scarlett Johansson, I can tell you that.
Let's see. She's just credited as Major.
Yeah.
So they've changed a few of the names
Well,
here.
I mean, she is a major. Like, that is
Right.
her title. She's Major Makoko Kusanagi.
Oh man,
And it
Takeshi
is
Kitano's in there.
be in Japan. And I mean, it is the future, and they do even make a point in the manga and the anime of pointing out that like ethnicity is kind of all over the place. Like in today's society, yeah, you go to Japan, it's not like America. 99.9% Japanese ethnic people, but they are giving us this future where Japan is more ethnically diverse. But still, you can't just do that to the main fucking character.
Maybe in Tokyo, but you know, you may have some more racial diversity, I guess.
Yeah, because like I said, even in the original, they do make a point of showing us that there's some more racial diversity going on and stuff like that. I don't know. It's funny. I that was a manga I didn't get for many years, and I feel kind of shortchanged because I got this latest version of it, which is good. It has all sorts of extra stuff in it, but in the original version, there were a few extra panels that have since been taken out. There's this part where it's supposed to be that the major is like having some time off. She just did a mission, so now she has time off, and she's on this boat with a couple other like smoking hot cyborg chicks, and they have like virtual reality like headsets on, and they're having like this cool badass like orgy together.
Oh yeah.
But a few years later, when they were doing the re-release, what's his name? Oh, why do I keep forgetting his name? I have to keep looking at it. Shiro Masamune said, well, I guess some of that was gratuitous, so I took about 5 or 6 of those panels out. Changed. I want my orgy panels back. So yeah, in the version I have, you have like 1 or 2 panels of it, and then the whole point is she gets interrupted, she gets a call, and she has to leave. And so it goes on for a few more panels before that happens.
It wasn't just a re-release. It was like he re-edited or
well, that's the only thing. He just said he felt when they were doing it that he should just remove those panels because they were gratuitous. He was just like, well, they weren't really part of the story. It was just, for the sake of this, so I took them out. He said. But, I mean, fair enough. But just part of me thinks, oh, man.
Well, I mean, that's what people are. They're a fan of the original work,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's really funny for him to like even say anything about gratuity, considering like even the most straightforward works that aren't supposed to be about anything, like they're not hentai, they're not about sex. Even those, it's just sort of a normal thing in manga for there to be fan service. That's where fan service comes from. Japan gave us fan service, and he's just taking some out because he thinks it's gratuitous, and he's not wrong. But I'm just like, there's respect for it because most of the people that like this, they appreciate a little fan service. I'm not even saying I don't. I'm not saying I'm above that. All sorts of people out there that like to distance themselves from, any sort of erotica that is drawn because they just like to say that it's not real. And okay, sure. I'm completely at ease telling people, yes, I can certainly be aroused or turned on by lines on paper. Okay, yeah, sure, fine. Like I don't see that as something to be ashamed of or to hide or anything like that, because lots of stuff isn't real. And I mean, porn's not real either. I guess those people are real, but you can't fuck them either. So, but anyway.
Well, there's no tentacles in there either, so you need to get those tentacles in there.
Yeah. Well, I'm a total perv about something, but no, not so much tentacles. It's funny. You know why the tentacles exist, don't you?
Because they can't show insertion otherwise.
Well, yeah, that's how it started. Exactly. That's what it was at first. They couldn't show insertion otherwise, so they came up with a way around it. And then, of course, because everybody's a pervert, eventually just sort of caught on. A lot of people are like, I like this more. They're like, and it became a thing. But that's why. That was why. It was just like at the time they censored. They couldn't pretty funny how like some of like the most out there porn you can find in the internet, and yet a lot of it will be they'll have like they'll have to do the pixelation for certain areas. It's just like seems so like pointless what they'll do. They'll be like, here's this chick spreading her ass out there, and you can see that fine, but pixels below, because that's the indecent part. It's weird.
Yeah, I've never understood.
I've thoroughly researched this, by the way, because research.
Well,
We better quit.
We could definitely go down that road for a little while, but let's not.
Yeah, we'll save it for another show, maybe.
Yeah.
And then we veered so off topic. So I hope you guys like hearing about fantasy and Willow, X-Men, and Marvel, and comic book movies in general, and then, I don't know, manga adaptations and whitewashing. Yeah, I'm not proud of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just prefer us to like stay more on topic, so it's more of a tight thing. But whatever, who cares?
Orc says he likes where it's going, so he wants more of the.
I bet he does.
Orc is a fan of the tentacles, by the way, so we've established that in the past.
Fair enough. To each their own. Yeah. Hey, like I said, I'm not ashamed of anything I'm into it. But it is true that not so much tentacles. Not so much, no. But no tentacles and Ghost in the Shell. No sex scenes in Ghost in the Shell, except for that. And like I said, you need the original version to get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's no insert. Well, that's lesbian stuff because it's all girls.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, for sure. You can probably like type into Google like missing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Or, like removed panels or something like that. It's funny. Like I didn't, because like I said I didn't read it until years later, so I could have like not known that, and then I read something about it, and I was like, "I'm shortchanged. You're taking up some of this."
Oh, so you didn't have the original?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Panels.
I had to find out about it later that it had been removed because I thought I was being smart because like that's how it worked. Like say with Akira, at least 3 times in the West. Started buying. I was like, "Oh, this is good. Like, this is better than the Dark Horse version. This is the Kodansha version. I'm glad to have it. I got in at the right time." So I felt kind of the same way about Ghost in the Shell. I was like, "Oh, here's this anniversary edition or whatever. I got in at the right time because this has this extra stuff." And then I read later that he removed some panels. I was like, "What?" Anyway. Yeah. So it's kind of funny, but we're gonna try to continue on with some fantasy stuff. All sorts of weird roads to go down next time because anybody that's heard me talk on the Sausage Factory and I talk about animation and stuff, I've also talked about my conflicted views about Ralph Bakshi, and since we're going to announce we're doing a Ralph Bakshi film next week, ones that is really weird, 1977's Wizards, all people. He was doing this at the same time he was doing Star Wars, which is sort of crazy to think about now. But yeah, so yeah, want to continue with some fantasy and stuff, and again get away from some of the heavier stuff, do some more lighthearted things, and so that's the road we're going down for now. From there, but for here, the segue is Willow to 1977's Wizards, which I have to think that most of our audience probably hasn't seen. You haven't seen it yet.
It is on YouTube in its entirety.
There you
if you
go.
guys want to watch it there.
So yeah, just watch it any way you can. One spoiler I'll give is like I don't think it's good. No, I don't think it's good. Crazy, weird mess, but it's interesting and definitely worth talking about, as is his career, and we will get into that next week for sure. Like I said, even though I don't think it's good, I am excited to watch it again, and I'm definitely excited to say things about it too, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about Bakshi, and I'm sure other things as we do. Off the rails, but like I said, we were off for a couple weeks. I think we had some things we had to vent about.
Sure.
So. And before everybody says, "How can you hate Logan?" Well, I don't hate it. It is what it is. But like I said, I await that. Hopefully, in my lifetime, there'll be like Wolverine someday. No, just Hugh Jackman's okay, and he does a really good job in this movie. Not any complaints about him personally.
Yeah.
But no, it's for a comic book purist like me. It's not the way to go. Watching, guys, and we'll keep it a little tighter next time for sure. Probably. I don't know. There's some bonus content. I don't think anybody minds any of that. So thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you in a week's time for sure. And
take it easy.